Hey everybody, it's David Duford here at Buy Life Insurance for Burial, where I help people like you with your life insurance and burial insurance questions. And in today's presentation, I will be specifically taking a lot of time to answer the question, how does burial insurance work? Most likely you're watching this presentation today because you are beginning or in the middle of doing your due diligence and trying to find out if a burial insurance type of policy is something that is sensible either for yourself or for somebody you love. And if that describes you, then hopefully what you'll find in this presentation is the answers to the vast majority of your questions. So let's go ahead and get started. So first, I'm going to introduce myself to you formally if you've not watched any of my other presentations, as well as my business. I'm going to give you after that the what I would consider at least my official version of the definition of what burial insurance is. And then I'm going to explain to you how to qualify for a burial insurance product. A lot of you might be thinking this is a life insurance product, and there's sometimes some clarification necessary to describe the difference between both. Then I'm going to explain how to ensure your burial insurance stays active and does not cancel. This is really important because there are a lot of companies selling so-called burial insurance, and because it's burial insurance doesn't necessarily mean it's the best kind. So I'll kind of tell you a little bit about the fine print just to be made aware of that. Then we'll talk about what the details are on what happens with burial insurance upon passing away. Specifically, I'm going to break it down by product segmentation. So for example, what happens if you have a guaranteed issue burial insurance plan? What happens if you have what's called a graded burial insurance plan? And then what happens if you have what's called a level burial insurance plan? And then lastly, I'm going to talk to you about something called contestability, how that affects your insurance, and why you should just be made aware of it in your process for finding life insurance. I'm also going to answer the question you're probably wondering, who gets the money from a burial insurance policy? Sometimes people think there are multiple forces involved in that process. I'm going to dispel some of the rumors there. Then I'm going to talk about the best burial insurance options and include some companies and rates just as a general idea of what's out there, what the prices run for, to give you an idea of what your options are. And then finally, we're going to conclude with discussing what the next steps are if in fact you like the idea of buying burial insurance and it makes sense for you. Okay, so my name is David Duford. I am the owner and operator of BuyLifeInsuranceForBurial.com. I specialize in the burial insurance business, helping people generally over 50, younger too at times, with any kind of final expense burial insurance needs. I've been licensed as an agent since 2011 and have helped well over 3,000 people now across the country with their burial insurance needs. So I've dealt with people in all walks of life, in all sorts of health, good, bad, and everything in between. I'm also a published author of 2 books. The one most relevant to you is called The Official Guide to Buying Final Expense Life Insurance. It's a short guide to help identify what plans are out there for consumers and how to pick the best one based on your goals and health. In addition to helping people with insurance, as well as being an author, I'm also an insurance agency owner. I actually help agents and train them to become specialists in their local community, to help them in their local community with their life insurance and burial insurance needs. I do that nationwide. I'm also married with children. Number 4 is on the way as I put up this presentation as well. So cross your fingers and wish us the best of luck. Okay, so let's talk about the definition of burial insurance. Let's dispel any kind of confusion there may be right up front. So first of all, burial insurance is life insurance. There is no difference at all between the term burial insurance and life insurance. The reason we use burial insurance is because many years ago, insurance companies recognized that there were a lot of consumers that were buying burial insurance plans specifically to cover for final expenses. They didn't want large 6-figure type plans. They just wanted smaller $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 plans, maybe a little bit more, maybe even a little bit less, but just enough to cover those final expenses as it related to being buried through funeral costs, cremation cost, or any other kind of final expenses like a small debt. So burial insurance is the term we use when we refer to these life insurance products because it better gets a picture in the mind of what it is that we're exactly trying to accomplish. The other thing is that burial insurance in most circumstances is a whole life insurance product. So to give you just a crash course on how whole life insurance works, real simple, the benefits are the rates never increase with whole life insurance. Your coverage never cancels, because you get too old or your health changes. And in certain circumstances, if your health is good enough, you may qualify for first day full coverage. So after the first payment, you're fully protected. Now, the reason I said some, but not all burial insurance is whole life insurance is because there is another kind of plan out there called term life insurance. Term life insurance is short for terminating life insurance. When you literally buy one of these plans, you make it to the point where you outlive it. And the policy, in some cases, goes up as you get older. This is not a good deal because, in my opinion, if your goal here, I'm not talking about other goals with life insurance, this is specifically a conversation about burial insurance and covering burial. The nature of the problem must match the ability of the policy to solve it. So in layman's terms, what I mean by that, death itself is guaranteed. There's no question if somebody's going to die or not. We're all going to die. The question is just when. It could happen tomorrow. It can happen 50 years from now. It could happen any time in between. So we need a plan that will guarantee that uncertainty of when we die is not a problem. So then why would you get a plan you could outlive? Why would you take a plan out that you are essentially gambling you'll die before a certain date versus after? So a lot of these plans that you get through the mail are designed to cancel at 80 years old. So if you live to 80 years old in a day, you lose your coverage and all that money is wasted and you don't get a dime. Whereas with whole life insurance, it doesn't matter when you pass away. As long as you keep up with the premiums remain the same, the coverage remains the same, and you can't be canceled. So the bottom line is a whole life insurance plan, in my experience, does a much better job matching the solution to the problem of dying and the problem of not knowing when, with the solution of an insurance policy that doesn't take into any account as to when your death may occur. It will be there no matter what, as long as you're paying. In my opinion, much better deal. So how do you actually take out a burial insurance program to begin with? So like life insurance, you apply for a burial insurance product through a life insurance company. So life insurance companies, they offer life insurance. Sometimes they offer disability insurance, cancer insurance. Burial insurance is just another one of the products that they offer you as a consumer. And you have to go through a company and let them underwrite you to determine whether or not you're insurable. So there's some choices here that you do have as to the route to get to actually applying for the burial insurance program. So let's talk about that. So the most common method you may see are advertisements on TV, the junk mail you constantly get, or maybe even ads you see on the internet. These ads, these particular types of companies, the pros of these is you don't have to go through an agent. You just send in the application and hopefully get approved. The downside, I believe, is much outweighs the pros in the sense that usually the plans that are on TV and the mail or advertised on the internet are really high in price, or they've got limitations on coverage, whether it's in the beginning or in the end. So take, for example, one client I met, the very first client I helped with a policy. His dad had a plan through a company that advertises on TV, and unbeknownst to him, it had a 2-year waiting period provision. He died 12 months in the plan thinking he was fully covered. And when the kids went to collect on the policy, they only received the money back plus a little bit of interest instead of the full $5,000. And they had to go into debt just to bury their father. And so I say this because at the time when he took it out, he would have qualified for full coverage at a much better price. Instead of $5,000, he probably would have gotten $7,000 or $8,000 for the same price. So hopefully you can see that buying a plan through the TV or mail, you're only given their set of options, which tend to be higher priced and lower quality. The second way you can get a policy is through dealing with what's called a captive agent. Captive agents represent one company. They're usually specialists with that particular company in the final expense burial insurance business. But the biggest downside to a captive agent is their prices are higher and their coverage isn't nearly as good quality as you can find with what's called an independent agent. An independent agent, like myself, represents a variety of different life insurance companies that have burial insurance products. And essentially what we do is after we figure out your health profile, we go out to these companies and basically see who's going to give us and bid out the best price and the best value of coverage. So the benefit to you as the client is you usually get a better price. You usually get more coverage for that price, and in many cases, even with health issues, you can get better quality of coverage, assuming that your health is good enough to qualify for it. So there's really no downside to working with an independent agent because he's not married to one company. And many times the mindset of an independent agent is that they're trying to look out for your best interest and figure out what's going to be the best combination of price and value for yourself if you're looking to get insured or for somebody else. Now with a whole life burial insurance plan, there's no examination necessary. You just fill out an application. You might have to do a phone interview, but after you do that, the policy gets issued if you get approved, and that's it. There's no exams, there's no detailed medical underwriting, none of that stuff. So there's a brief medical check of your health history. Usually they only look back a couple of years. They look at your prescription as well, do a phone interview, and usually, again, it takes a couple of days, not a couple of weeks, to get a final insurance decision. So part of this process with buying a burial insurance plan and learning how a burial insurance program works is you want to make sure you keep a burial insurance policy on the books. So here's what I mean. I have an old saying that I picked up from another agent. Probably it's been in the business as a saying for 100 years. It's this: the policy that stays is the policy that pays. The policy that you want to get as an insured person is one that's easily affordable. You want to make sure it's a policy that does the job and it's not something at risk later on that you're going to drop. There's nothing more wasteful than having somebody take out a plan, keep it for 6 months, and then drop it. That's a bad use of your money, and that's not the kind of burial insurance you need. So I want to share with you a case study from a recent death claim that I had. I just had a gentleman in Tennessee who I sat with 3 or 4 years ago, just passed away. He had a $5,000 policy. And in that process of sitting with him, I made it completely clear that all I care about as an agent, even though I'm a salesperson, is making sure this is easily affordable. And in the conversation, in a sense, I had to walk him down in premium just so he could feel totally comfortable that his policy was affordable and something he could keep. Well, so fast forward just a couple days ago, I got a phone call from his daughter-in-law saying that he had passed away. And if I had pushed too hard for this guy to take out double the coverage, even though it would have been more coverage and certainly would have been good after the fact, he might have dropped it along the way, thinking, I just can't help how expensive this policy is. So for me, that policy is going to go towards his wife. It's going to help her out and keep her life a little bit easier. And in the end, it was a good deal. So again, price is very important when buying burial insurance, especially since most people are on a fixed income that do take this out. Now, there's important elements for your future burial insurance policy you should consider. Again, I can't hark on it enough. Is it affordable? It's got to be easily affordable, something that fits in your budget. Does it cover what you want? I'm a big believer that the goal of buying burial insurance first should be to meet the need of what it is you want to accomplish. So if you want to buy enough to cover a basic cremation, usually $3,000 to $5,000 in coverage is plenty. If you want a burial and the whole ball of wax covered with that, we're looking at somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 depending on what part of the country that you go to or live in. So the bottom line is you want to make sure what you get is sensible. You want to make sure that it's realistic in accomplishing the goals that you want, along with it actually being affordable. Again, this is another element. Do you want your policy to be a whole life or term life insurance? Hopefully I'm making the case that if you're looking for a burial insurance plan, it's smart to buy a whole life insurance plan because it doesn't terminate after reaching a certain age as long as you continue the premiums, whereas term life insurance, while I do sell and help people with term life, doesn't make sense for the senior usually looking for a burial plan that does not want to outlive that coverage. The other thing, of course, mentioned with that are the rates locked in place, especially if you're on a fixed income as a senior. You don't want price increases steadily increasing. You don't want anything going up at all, right? You want to fit that in your budget, forget about it, know it's affordable, and never worry about a rate increase. You don't want a plan like the ones on TV, in the mail, or on the internet that sell you a plan but go up incrementally every 5 years. That will put severe pressure on your wallet. And again, there's nothing worse than losing the coverage because it was too expensive or became too expensive. Is the company reputable? I think this is pretty important. You certainly want to work with a company that has a long-standing history of being in business, that's ranked well by the AM Best company. That's basically like an auditing company that goes in and assesses the financial strength of each life insurance company. And you just want to make sure that they do what they say and follow through on their promises. Do you trust the agent? I think this is the biggest one. You want to make sure the biggest component of working with anybody is making sure your agent is the guy that you feel is good at going to bat for you, helping you out, servicing you, and feels like is a good resource and well of knowledge and can help you with your concerns and definitely can navigate the options out there to get you the best deal. So let's talk how a burial insurance plan works when somebody passes away after having it on the books. So once an insured dies, the beneficiary, the next step is to file a claim with the insurance company. Again, I had a death claim come in yesterday, and the lady, her dad passed away. I gave her information on contacting the claims department. So the next step is to call up the company and begin to file the claim, whether I do it on your behalf or whether your beneficiary does it on their behalf. Depending on the situation and type of insurance product, at this stage, several things may happen. So what's going to follow now is a breakdown of what to expect depending on the kind of burial insurance plan you got. So there is something called a guaranteed acceptance life insurance plan. Now what that is a plan that has no natural death coverage for the first 2 years, but then beyond that it's in full coverage. If you have a guaranteed issue burial insurance program and you die within the first 2 years, the death claim is filed, and pretty quickly what was paid in by the insured or the payor is paid to the beneficiary plus 10% interest in most cases. So it's not a full face amount payout. Why is that the case? Because if you apply for a guaranteed acceptance life insurance plan, by default there's going to be a waiting period on natural death coverage in most circumstances. After those period of time, usually 2 years, then the full death claim is paid out without delay. So you may be asking, well, geez, I don't want a guaranteed issue plan. We'll get to that in a little while, and I'll explain to you how to hopefully circumvent that. Now, there's also what's called graded burial insurance. And what graded burial insurance does, it's like a guaranteed acceptance, except there's health questions, and they give you partial coverage the first year and then the second year. The first year is about 30%, and the second year it goes up to 70% of the amount of coverage. For example, if you buy a $10,000 plan, you're immediately covered for $3,000, that's 30%. In year 2, you're covered for $7,000, which is 70%, and then beyond year 2, it's full first day coverage for the amount of coverage. So this is a little bit better. So depending on what year you die is how much gets paid out. So be aware of that. And then with level coverage, at any time after the first payment is made, assuming everything was done correctly, we're going to talk about contestability issues in a second. As long as everything gets through the contestability provisions in the contract, even with one period or one payment paid in, and everything checks out, it's going to be the full death benefit paid to the beneficiary. Even if, again, one payment in, it can be 12 payments in, anything between the first 2 years. Now, that brings us to contestability issues. So let me define what contestability is and tell you the reasons why it's done. And even though it's not necessarily a good thing, hopefully to understand that all these companies do it. So contestability is a Department of Insurance mandated law that says every single life insurance company has the right, if an insured person dies within the first 2 years, that they can delay paying a death claim until they have appropriately reviewed all health history within, usually in the last 10 years, from the insured. Now here's why they do that. I'll give you the perfect example. I had a client that took a policy out for me and attested his perfect health. He got approved and then died 14 days afterwards after making the first payment. And it turns out that he had had cancer and he knew about it. And so what happened is that if we allow people to have insurance coverage, knowingly defrauding the system, and we're going to pay out a full death claim benefit to the beneficiary even though they're not playing fair, that ends up affecting everybody. Insurance is a pool of managed risk. So everybody pitches in. Some people die early, other people die late, but it allows for this ability to pay in case somebody passes away. So if people begin to defraud the system, then the whole system falls apart. So if you really think about it, even though things happen and people die suddenly, it could be potentially fishy if someone suddenly passes away. So this is why the Department of Insurance in most states allows for, within the first 2 years of the policy in effect, to basically make sure that there wasn't any outstanding information they should have caught on the front end before paying that death claim out. The process can take months. I've seen 3 months, I've seen 6 months before the death claim payout. And understand, as frustrating as this may be, it is something that is not unique. Virtually all life insurance companies will contest a claim if someone dies from natural causes within the first 2 years. The only way around it, really, is just to make sure when you apply for an application that you apply for one in full transparency. Make sure all the questions that are asked exactly as they are. There should be no gray room, and if there is, let your agent know, because many times, especially as an independent agent, they can look around and see if there's a better deal than just the one being offered. So it's not great, but it's something that is there, and I've had plenty of people who were contested still get their full death benefit, at least to their beneficiary. It just takes some extra time, but at the end of the day, even with the time passed, if it is contestable, it is something that is much better preferred than an obvious 2-year waiting period where all that would have been paid was just the money paid in. So who gets the money from a burial insurance program? Some people wonder, well, who gets what? Is it the funeral home? Is it the trust? Is it something like that? Well, simply put, the beneficiary or beneficiaries are the only people who receive the money from your burial insurance policy. And yes, they can do whatever they want with it. Notwithstanding any sort of legal will or anything like that would preclude this. Bottom line is, all the insurance company's job to do is to pay a claim to the beneficiary. They usually have no decision-making power to force the beneficiary to invest or spend that money in a certain way. So here's the deal. Obviously, if you're looking at a burial insurance program, you're probably thinking about having a plan to pay for the burial. So it goes without saying, please make sure the beneficiary or beneficiaries you choose is somebody you can trust. You want the person who will actually follow through on your requests, how to be buried, where to be buried, or cremated. You don't want somebody, like I've heard of just the other day, get a death claim payout and then not do anything with it. Just keep the money and then let the rest of the family try to come up with the money to properly bury you. Also, don't forget to add a backup beneficiary. So if your first beneficiary dies, perfect example, husband and wife, if the wife dies first and then the husband dies, make sure you put somebody as a contingent beneficiary, a backup beneficiary, a son, a grandson, somebody you can trust to manage your funeral. Again, case study, there have been circumstances where people have only designated one person as a beneficiary. There's no backup, so by default, the law says that claim is paid to the estate, and then it's transferred to a probate court, and it can take up to a year before the court decides who gets what. And then there's fees associated with it, so it gets tied up, and it's just a real frustration point. So do yourself a favor. Make sure your beneficiaries are accurate, up to date, and who you want them to be. And you can also name a funeral home if you really want to. You can name a loved one, like a grandchild. It doesn't have to be a direct descendant of you or somebody like that. Or you can leave the money to a church. Maybe you just want to give a gift of love to a church. That's totally fine too as well. The key point here is to understand you're in charge of who gets what money when it comes to your life insurance policy. So make sure you give some thought as to who you want the beneficiaries to be. So let's talk about the best burial insurance options. We're going to check some rates out in companies so you can see a couple of different ages and a couple of different setups as far as what's available for men and women for burial insurance. We're going to pull up a $10,000 plan for a couple of different ages. We'll probably go ahead and do 60, 70, and 80 for non-smokers. And again, this is just for educational purposes only. This is not a quote for you. I have to ask you all the health questions. I'm sure you understand that. This is just for an example's purpose of showing what's possible when you buy a burial insurance plan. Okay, so what you're looking at here is a $10,000 plan for level coverage for a 65-year-old non-smoking male in Tennessee. So you're looking at somewhere between an average premium size of, on the low end, $47 to the mid-50s. Again, there's a lot of different companies here, and which one that would be selected just depends on how you answer the health questions. But again, just to give you a general idea of what the possibilities are. Okay, so now we're looking at a 65-year-old female non-smoker. And of course, women are always less expensive, apples to apples comparison, than men for life insurance. No exception here, mid-30s to mid-40s for $10,000 in first day full coverage. Now we're looking at a 75-year-old male, $10,000 first day full coverage, non-smoker. Again, with the age increase, there's a price increase. Lower 80s to right around the $100 mark for $10,000. Female 75-year-old non-smokers for $10,000 in level coverage are looking between low 60s to mid 70s. And here's 85-year-old, $10,000 in coverage on a non-smoking male. You'd be looking at 160s to mid 230s, 240s. And lastly, we're looking at 85-year-old non-smoking females for $10,000 in level benefit, low 120s to the 180s range. So what I'll say about this lastly is we just looked at a 65, 75, and 85-year-old rate for non-smoker males and females. Again, just for disclosure's sake, I'm sure you understand this. It's going to be less expensive if you're younger than 65. It's going to be more expensive if you're 65 or older and smoke. And ultimately, these are just ballpark figures that just kind of give you an idea of what to sort of expect depending on where your age falls in between the 65 to 75 to 85 range. We can definitely go younger than this. I've gotten people in their 20s approved for these kind of products. Usually we do so because they've got health issues that need to be overcome and there's no other way to get approved. So I want to assure you that what we're looking at here is just an idea, an estimate to give you some thought as to what the numbers are going to run for how much you get. And again, you can certainly get less than $10,000. If you just want to be cremated, $5,000 is plenty. If you want to get more, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000, you can do that. So let's talk about how to qualify for burial insurance. So the application process is very simple. Find an agent you like, and hopefully that's me right here. I can work with people across the nation. I help people with all of their burial insurance needs, and I can do it from the comfort of your home, from over the internet or through the mail. And once your agent figures out what it is that you're looking for and you like the quote that you see, the next step is to do an application over the phone or do it electronically through the email or snail mail. Sometimes that's what we do. And usually it takes just a few days or a week or two, and then your coverage is approved. And several weeks later, you get your policy, and that's it. You've got your policy, you're approved for coverage if they're accepted, and you now have the peace of mind you're looking for. So final steps, if you are interested in looking at burial insurance and seeing what you can qualify for, then there's two things you can do. You can go to my website, it's buylifeinsuranceforburial.com. Request a free quote. You can go to the contact page, submit me a message, or go to the bottom of the website. You'll see a little pop-up box where you can chat with me personally. Either method is fine, and I'm happy to communicate with you via messages. Otherwise, the best and easiest way, and fastest too, to look at a policy is to call 888-626-0439. That allows you to speak with me live. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes of asking some health questions to figure out what your options are for burial insurance coverage. I'll tell you what they are, and what you do with it's entirely up to you. There's no stress or pressure here. I just want to help if you need the help and determine for yourself if help is appropriate. If you like this video, please leave a comment and thumbs up the video, and also subscribe if you like these kinds of videos. And closing out, my name is David Duford at buylifeinsuranceforburial.com, and thank you so much again for watching this presentation. Take care.